expedition of 18 months into Africa's interior was filmed under the leadership of Wynant D. Hubbard, explorer and fellow of the American Geographical Society. Choma, in northwest Rhodesia, was our point of departure from depression and modern plumbing. After one of its habitual cloudbursts, Choma offers little encouragement to move a large safari into the wilderness, but confidence was as high as our hotel bills. So for both reasons, the boss here, Mr. Hubbard, politely speaking, supervises the final packing. Loading the many wagons of a safari is a tough job, and when these oxen pull you slowly but surely away from civilization, there's no corner drugstore to replace the toothbrush you left behind. And if Mrs. Hubbard forgets safety pins for the youngsters' underthings, well, there isn't even a Mahatma Gandhi to lend you a spare. This African Pullman is transportation deluxe for Mother Hubbard and her brood. Taking 2 babies on this trip requires courage and careful planning. All set, the safari moves forward. 156 oxen hauling 10 wagons. Mr. Hubbard mounts his stallion. Kaplunk! The little lady's been reducing. The wagons are loaded with food and equipment for our long exile from civilization, and also many tons of barter, salt principally. A native will exchange a couple of his wives for a pound of it, and throw in a few mother-in-laws for good measure. As we left Choma, we were warned that recent storms had made thick gumbo mud of the veldt, the sun drying only a thin, deceiving crust. And 2 days out of Choma, we found the truth of this warning, but it looked dry enough. The heavily loaded wagons have bogged the wheels nearly to the hubs. It's shovel out, move forward, and go in a little deeper. Nothing to do but unload before the wagons can be released. The dogs sense something. An iguana, ancient grandpappy to the lizard. The iguana seems to be a Burbank cross between snake and crocodile. The native spear its bite as deathly poisonous. Despite the native spear of this reptile, they regard an iguana steak as nature's most delicious offering. Not a very appetizing looking creature, but maybe I'm wrong. Here's an interested observer, the wise old grass owl. The capture of this sagacious bird would produce an effective guardian of our grain supplies, an exterminator of the voracious field mice. The difficulty here is to find a safe place to make a contact. The claws and beak form an effective offense, difficult to penetrate. Mad as the proverbial boiled owl. Got him? Almost, but not quite. A bundle of pleasantries, like a porcupine. Picture of rage and resentment. This little tyrant later became one of our most friendly pets. The heavy rains made fetid swamps of every depression in the veldt. This particular depression brought plenty to us. Plenty of roast goose. Our game guide had set his trap with this result, a marabou stork. This stork supplies the soft feathers used in adorning my lady's seductive boudoir fineries, which may or may not account for the more generally accepted legend of the stork. The oribi, one of the most shy and graceful animals of the African veldt. The oribi's speed is its only defense against innumerable enemies, voracious beasts, always on the watch for a chance to gobble this dainty morsel. We hear the click of a deserted native trap. Unwittingly, this exquisite creature is ours to tame as a pet. A thing of such beauty is rare in this bleak wilderness, truly the delicate head of a patrician. Returning to the safari, we caught this unusual sight. These quadrupeds are news. Somewhere in their development, they were given a queer deal. To start with, they have the head of a buffalo, the mane of an ass, and to finish this off, they were given a horse's rear end. But even with this mismated assembly, they can clip off an easy 40 miles an hour. At this distance, they resemble neither buffalo, ass, nor horse. They look more like galloping fish. Here we see Mr. Hubbard and some of our boys setting a snare on the well-worn trail of a civet cat. Unlike our American skunk, the African cousin keeps his aroma excretions to himself, preferring to use his sharp, pointed teeth and vicious claws to tear his victim into various and sundry pieces. Imagine doing this to the good old American skunk. This is one time when an excretion would be the better part of valor. One of the few wild animals to scorn any friendly overture is this little dynamo of hatred. Even when caught young and raised in captivity, he still develops that snarling, bitter hatred of all things man. The spirit and image of Africa, untamable.
The natives could never understand our desire to photograph rather than kill, and were more interested in this hairy denizen of the brush, known as the bush pig. This deserted native pitfall has favored us with a potential pork pie. Knowing that this specimen resembled the domesticated porker more in taste than looks, we were later reconciled to give him to the cook rather than the cameraman. An arrangement satisfying everyone except the pig. With the various results of our gunless hunt, we returned to the safari, where the last wagon was being drawn out of the gumbo mud by all our oxen, an immense power plant of 156 beasts. It took 6 weeks of this torturous travel to cover 135 miles, but we finally reached our objective, Kabilawanda village. The population here consists mostly of insects. Billions of flies and stinging mosquitoes welcomed us as a change in diet. Native craft was immediately commissioned to build our huts and trade store, being paid the union scale of 3 teaspoons of salt plus board. Mixing wall plaster. It's made from a natural substance developed and left behind by millions of termite ants in their process of digestion. It dries as hard as concrete, fortunately resembling it more or less. The younger Hubbards, apprenticed mudslingers. The curiosity of children is only comparable to these pukus. Their curiosity has never developed stronger than caution. If unfamiliar objects approach too closely, they unceremoniously leave. Zebras keeping company with roan and waterbuck. Gawky vegetarians of the wilderness, these giraffes. They got that way from trying to eat off treetops, necessitating a permanent extension of the neck. This elongation provides an excellent defense, a periscope to see approaching danger at great distance, thus giving their comparatively defenseless bulk a fair safety in flight. They're ruminants like cows. Imagine getting that cut up again for another chewing. In direct contrast, these agile impala are among the swiftest animals known to man.
Alert, hair-triggered, these marvelous creatures can jump 40 feet in each flying leap. A comet-like target, which tries the skill of the ablest marksman. Our huts and trade store finished, the outland natives brought in their local brand of corn called mealy mealy. Also ivory to exchange for blankets, salt, beads, calico, parasols, and the various trinkets we offered in trade.
This affluent trader brought in 5 sacks of mealy to trade in on blankets. Yes, and with the temperature reaching close to 125 degrees in the shade. Having several hundred native boys to feed, these traders were assured a good market for their grain. An African runabout. The disc wheels are cross sections of the mephiston tree, hard as steel. When these Miss Africas go shopping, their purse is a leather head bucket filled with 60 pounds of mealy, and they carry it for miles. Even with such prodigious strength, they're no match for our civilized shopper. Give these girls 2 hours in one of our bargain sales and they'd be stretched flatter than their native lowlands. The ebony beauty on this end is unmarried, indicated by her white breastcloth, worn only by single women, possibly as free advertisement. She's offered calico with a gentle color scheme of red, purple, green, and bilious blue, but the combination's too tame for her primitive tastes. Celluloid bracelets? No, she craves something light for evening wear. That's more like it, a cotton shirt. She's been in one of those things before, the way she handles the combination. Now look me over. That'll set my girlfriends on their ears. Just let them copy that snappy model. Hi-ho. Our umbrellas sold fast. The sun's strong here, and they evidently wish to keep that schoolgirl complexion. This slinking prowler came not to trade. Leopards consider dog meat a great delicacy, and a well-fed camp dog would be a prize catch. He figured without us, however, and his unexpected rush for an exit carried him directly into the chicken yard. Leopards have a vicious weapon in their fang-like claws, which dig deeply into one's flesh, leaving behind poisons which eventually result in death. This pleasant creature is effectively tied with rope, made from the bark of these maponi trees. Long pieces of this bark are rolled until it separates into individual fibers. In toughness, it's similar to Indian hemp, only tougher. No, this is not a wristwatch. Natives have small regard for time, but they are superstitious. And that happens to be a charm made from an ivory ring and elephant hair, blessed by the old witch doctor himself. The patience of these natives in their industry is remarkable. This human sawmill worked all morning to make one cut down this tough white mahogany log. And now the happy interlude, lunch. Scorched zebra meat, pièce de résistance and ambrosia to the African epicure. Preparing wild vegetables for a stew. In dry seasons, plant roots grow hard and fibrous, requiring a heavy pounding to make them edible. Our water supply, also the animals, which accounts for the liquid's peculiar color and taste. Water's a precious problem in Africa, hence this economy. Here's a little monkey business. We called this little fellow Itches and his companion Scratches. They were absolutely inseparable. Itches follows Scratches and vice versa. A little diker formed the third point of this domestic triangle. Each little miniature being particularly jealous of the attentions this little lady pays the others. With all her blundering little ways, she was a great favorite, even though she moved among them like a little bull in a china shop. She's after Itches and gets Scratches, and with a stranglehold which would do justice to a professional bone crusher.
A closer view of the well-known team of Itches and Scratches, those inseparable companions.
The diker is one of the smallest antelopes known to science, and when full grown, like this one, weighs scarcely more than 10 pounds. A lioness never deserts her young, but through some mystery of the jungle, the natives found this baby wandering alone in a feeble daze. According to ethics of civilization, the natives should have searched for its mother and returned the child. But that's asking a little too much. After all, they might have found her. And then what? Here's little Shindig and his stork.
This stilt-legged old maternity assistant is making one of his postnatal inspections, a biological interest which little Shindig seems to resent. Water buffalo, magnificently courageous yet treacherous antagonists. These massive 2-ton brutes are feared by most big game hunters as infinitely more dangerous than lion or leopard. Even though riddled with high-powered bullets, their amazing vitality may drive them forward in a murderous charge. However, they carry a menace more deadly than being gored by formidable horns. On their back rides Africa's most dreaded scourge, the tsetse fly, which in turn is the carrier of the fatal disease known as nagana, or sleeping sickness. Hundreds of thousands of men and beasts have perished from the fiery bite of this insect. These water buffalo alone are immune from the fatal consequence of being bitten by the tsetse fly. Since most of our oxen had fallen an easy victim to this deadly disease, it was our idea to breed the buffalo with a domesticated stock and build up a natural resistance in the latter. To catch one of these beasts is something else again. Fortunately for the interests of our experiment, a mother and her calf have been left behind by the departing herd. It's much safer to be at the other end of that baby. This youngster is a stubborn little brute, the very incarnation of the devil that lies lurking in the heart and brain of every water buffalo. While we were tying up this belligerent youngster, the mother had located herself conveniently in a native pit trap. The extraction of this bellowing 2 tons of maternity was a problem, and was solved, as are most problems of this kind in Africa, by manpower. Because of their untamable ferocity, few specimens of African buffalo are found in zoological gardens. In a full-grown bull, menacing horns meet at the skull in a solid mass of bone, 14 inches thick. A terrifying weapon, which is also a shield for its small, vindictive brain, an armored protection that no rifle bullet can penetrate. The natives have probably tied this brute with these facts in mind, for she is tied, and with everything but a Houdini straitjacket. These oxen, furnishing motive power to the sled, were the only casualty of this particular capture. Bitten by the tsetse fly, they died 2 weeks after these photographs were taken. Difficult to drag the calf past his old swimming hole. Even if it was only a fever-ridden swamp, green with scum and swarming with a million living things, it was welcome even to us. Yes, we drank the water. Not bad at all with quinine for a chaser. We returned to the camp with the calf and the buffalo cow. Our subsequent breeding experiment, incidentally, was highly successful. Note the silk hat on Harry. It's an old Harry family heirloom. His great-grandfather was cannibalistic with a sweet tooth for missionaries. In the meantime, at Kabelawanda, a messenger had arrived from the interior, inviting Mr. Hubbard to visit King Eshazonga, one of the wealthiest and most powerful of native chiefs. Since the usual objective of such a diplomatic visit is an exchange of gifts, we took along blankets and a dozen mouth organs, assuring us a warm, if not musical, reception. With an escort of local natives, the diplomatic mission headed for the broad expanse of the Kafue River, which winds its way through primeval forests, never touched by the foot of a white man. Strangers in a strange land. Our alien presence was resented by these white-breasted storks. We also intruded upon the peaceful domain of these hippos, who noted our presence and sank lazily from view. Here was an unusual opportunity to study these pig-like monsters, so we turned our boat toward a sheltered point of observation. The hide of these corpulent beasts is about 2 inches thick, and when cured can be worked like wood. In translucence, it resembles old amber. Clumsy and deliberate on land, these grotesque survivors of a forgotten age spend most of their time in their adopted habitat, water. Our hungry boys urged us to shoot this baby and thus provide them with a lifetime of hippopotamus steaks, but her curious friendliness prevented this overt act, and she went her way unmolested. Come on now, say ah. With that demonstration, we left the hippos, and a few hours later caught sight of an evil flap-jawed monster basking in the sun, crocodile. Crocodile is one of the natives' most ruthless enemies, a hideous, crafty, man-eating reptile whose terrible jaws claim thousands of lives each year. The contents of a crocodile's stomach reveal much tragic history. Here are articles taken from the maw of this man-eater. First, a lion's tooth. Grim evidence that some careless native, not His Majesty the Lion, was the crocodile's victim. For the hole in the base proves that it was once the part of a decorative necklace. What mortal story this crude ring of polished ivory might tell, could it but speak? And what delight this little glass bead once brought some simple soul. The boys believed that crocodiles swallow small stones to keep tab of their victims. Was this rock then the reptile's tally for the kill which took some helpless native's life? For this is a human's tooth. It belonged perhaps to the once proud wearer of this intricately carved ivory, mute testimony of forgotten tragedy. And here is a tooth from the crocodile himself, broken off perhaps in some saurian battle, while this little horn is that of a duiker, the miniature species of antelope, similar in shape to this larger one, which once graced the head of a gentle oribi. Another tally stone, rough angles worn smooth by the powerful acids in the killer's stomach. So with little difficulty, we drew away from this loathsome reptile's nest and were greeted by the departing shriek of these long-billed snake birds who were waiting for their feast on crocodile meat. For many days, we followed a twisting, tortuous path up the Kafui River, never before traveled by white man. And where rotting jungle growth seemed to overflow into turbid waters, we found the overland trail to King Eshazonga's village. These monkeys, the original three of the Marx brothers, seemed to resent our intrusion into their privacy. We passed hundreds of these dog-faced baboons who watched us with curiosity as we forged over the soggy, steaming floor of the jungle. This gray monkey seemed to look at us as if he'd heard of Darwin and resented the Darwinian implications. As we drew farther from the river, the sight of these roan antelopes and impala feeding serenely together served as a reminder that our natives had promised to lead us to a secret waterhole where thousands of wild beasts could be photographed in their natural habitat. The farther we went, zebra and sable antelope were more and more in evidence. This magnificent specimen of sable antelope is rushing off to warn the herd of our presence. The sight of this herd of sable antelope was ample evidence that the natives were keeping their promise to lead us farther on to a sight of animal life, the like of which has been seen by few white men. What a sight! Hundreds of wildebeest and zebra gathered in friendly concourse for their evening drink. We hurriedly photographed these scenes before a change of wind could warn the animals of our presence. There were hundreds of these mournful-faced wildebeest at this hidden waterhole, unaware that man's age-old curiosity had at last found the way to their secret retreat. Suddenly, keen nostrils picked up our scent. The frightened animals fled. Paused for a second, and then we're off again. King Eshazonga's village, hundreds of miles away from civilization's nearest outpost, has been seen by few white men. Entering this primitive kraal, we noticed this boy attended by carved wooden figures. The explanation is simple. The natives of this tribe knocked out their front upper teeth so as to chew like the ox, their god of worship. But as this was rather rough on teeth, a compromise with their religion was effected by doing their worshiping through the medium of these monstrosities, made with teeth like an ox. An ingenious evasion of their religion, not exactly primitive. There's also ingenuity behind the conception of this primitive forge, which creates a terrific heat for the irons, which, in turn, are used to burn the images to their proper dusky shade. We bargained for one of these figures, but our offer of beads and calico met with refusal. It would be an insult to the great god, Mr. Ox. Going forward to our meeting with Eshazonga, we found this potentate surrounded by his potent cabinet officers. Eshazonga received Mr. Hubbard's gifts with princely grace. Only his smile indicated that his wealth of over $3 million in gold, ivory, and cattle could purchase our entire trade store without pinching the budget. Particularly pleased with a gaudy blanket, he dispatched his Secretary of the Treasury to draw from the government vaults a small gift for us. There were many of these treasure chests in evidence, and it was difficult to imagine their contents. So that's our small gift. 60 pounds of ivory, taken from one jungle king by another, and presented to us with a kindly yet imperial condescension. A 2-day visit with Eshazonga showed us the strength and intelligence of this native chieftain, and as we proceeded homeward, we knew that it was only the force of his powerful personality which kept his territory from the constant warfare of this wild region. Reed buck, stately creatures, a doe and a buck. Hyena, a dismal creature called Laughing because of his howl. This lioness is coming to contest the hyena's right to the kill. A smell of smoke in the air. Birds were flying from the horror of the African veldt. A grass fire sweeping toward us with the swiftness of the wind. Reaching the protection of the river, we were safe from the seething inferno which was moving up from the south. A wall of fire, 50 miles broad, with only death and destruction for everything in its path. The fire was miles away, but knowing that the wind was sweeping it directly toward Kabalawanda, we hurried forward. To reach our camp 2 days quicker, we had taken the dangerous North Fork, spanning waters never before traveled by white men. The guide had warned us against treacherous rapids and had spoken with even greater fear of the crocodiles which were said to infest these waters. Hugging the shore so as to avoid the swifter current of the middle stream, we realized too late that ours was a foolish choice. To rid ourselves of these loathsome creatures, we decided to risk the danger of overturning in the swifter current of the middle stream. An ominous roar reached our ears. One branch of our stream would carry us over these falls. thoughts returned to that raging inferno, which had swept a clean path hundreds of miles long, and during the night, its crackling terror had whipped suddenly forward, enveloping our camp in a consuming holocaust. The film record of the conflagration is due to the superior intelligence of one of the native boys, whom Mr. Frank had trained as one of his camera assistants. The fire is eating into the hut where some of our ammunition is stored. Returning to the camp, where fire had destroyed everything but our trade store and supplies, we followed this still smoking path. These impalas are enjoying themselves on a treat of ashes, which have a slight saline taste. Salt is a luxury on the African belt, animals craving it as well as man. It was a joyous homecoming, a warm reception, very warm. In a special hurry to add her greetings was the youngest Hubbard, Mafuda, whom the natives called the fat little sister who laughs. Oops, too fat. It was indeed a time for rejoicing. Our lives spared and even the trade store and most of our supplies saved from destruction. But there was no time to properly celebrate the occasion. The work of reconstruction had started immediately, natives needing termite dough for a second plastering. Building supplies are ready at hand, a deserted termite hill and straw for roofing being the most important, also the most plentiful items. Reconstruction progressed rapidly, and hearing a strange rumor that natives 100 miles south of Kabalawanda were starving to death in the very heart of the game country, we decided to investigate. As we drew near the village, game increased in abundance. Innumerable animals, roan, waterbuck, zebra. Surely these timid creatures should have been off at the first sight of their natural enemy, but they ignored us completely. What was the mystery? Why should anyone starve in the very heart of hunter's paradise, especially natives who gorge themselves on meat? As we drew close to the community, fasting in the midst of plenty, our native boy, who had gone ahead, came from the chief's hut with a strange story. The witch doctor had ordered that no game be killed for a period of 2 months, under penalty of death. Only by such abstinence could he free the natives from the evil spirits which possessed them. We knew, of course, but naturally not from the words of this starving chief, that the witch doctor was merely exercising his potent magic, but hadn't realized that the drought would prevent the natives from changing over to a vegetable diet. The native women anxiously searching the ground for stubs of cassava root, the tops having been eaten by foraging antelopes. The cassava, similar in taste to the Irish potato, is found all over Africa and has saved the life of more than one lost wanderer on the veldt. Knowing, however, that the village would starve on such a slim diet, Mr. Hubbard gathered together the hunters of the tribe, proving the witch doctor's magic to be mere humbug. Superstitious fear, however, was not to be dispelled so easily. Their interest was aroused only when Mr. Hubbard promised a plentiful supply of meat without killing the animals or even wounding them. Here was a proposal worth considering. They could eat meat that was not killed. But how was it possible for Mr. Hubbard to work this miracle? Summoned by means of the tom-tom, Africa's pulsating telegraph, our boys arrived a few days later, bringing nets from Kabalawanda. several hundred natives from other villages joining them en route. With the arrival of nets, however, Mr. Hubbard's stock as the great white magician took a terrific slump. Even if the animals were captured in these nets, they could not be eaten alive, and the great white chief had promised to obtain meat without killing. Mr. Hubbard, however, repeated his promise. Spears, knives, or guns would not be used in this hunt. As we came into the marshy country, the natives realized the promise would be kept, for this section abounds in these lechwe antelope. The lechwe has one feature which differentiates it from all other species. It dies of fright when taken captive, an important item in Mr. Hubbard's magic to defeat the witch doctor. Working against the wind so that the animals would not scent our presence, the nets were set up. This native feared the witch doctor's curse, so in spite of the heat wore a fur hat to keep away the devils. Hundreds of these poles were set into the soft ground by our boys, the local natives being in no condition for this work. Interesting photographic effect. It's produced by vapors from the marshy land. The natives will drive the animals toward the nets. This magnificent buck was only one of the many lechwe caught on this drive, and it is obvious he will soon succumb from fright. As we returned to the starving village with the results of our bloodless hunt, the natives went wild with joy. They had lost none of their fear of the witch doctor's magic, but Mr. Hubbard had triumphed over this magic. No one had killed. Meat had been supplied without drawing blood. The witch doctor's curse of death could not possibly work against them under such conditions. The long fast was broken. Haunches of lechwe meat were distributed to all, and it was not long before many groups of half-starved natives huddled over small fires as they followed the white man's custom of eating meat cooked, or rather scorched. To render this scorched meat edible, they pound it with a rock, and not knowing any better, they love it. After their long-starved appetite was satisfied, they gave thanks to their savior in primal song and dance. Returning to our village, we passed through Imongaila, a typical African kraal. Shumba, the lion. We stopped the action to show more clearly this terrific hold. This is quite possibly the primitive origin of our necking party. This lion has broken his paw. The oxen's horns are effective weapons, even against the king of beasts. The net shall be used again, this time in direct contrast to the timid lechwe, against the bravest and most savage of beasts. Needless to say, the net shall be used in 3 double thicknesses, for a netted lion has almost supernatural strength. This is the cub which escaped from the corral. We made the capture at the expense of losing our best native guide, who was disemboweled by the claws of this gentle little creature. Plans to capture this lion alive by closing off the lane at one end, then driving the infuriated animal into it, drop nets on him from above. Anyway, that's the plan. To understand is the natives' fear of the lion. Hundreds of men and thousands of their cattle are killed by these ferocious beasts each year. The villagers' days and nights forever uncertain as to the direction of the marauders' next depredating attack. Truly a cause for rejoicing as a safari approaches the village bearing in cages 2 of these live killers, the king of beasts, humbled by the weaker yet more clever enemy.
Certainly this is reason enough for festivity, and the tom-tom again sends a telegraphic message over the veldt. Tom-toms had drummed out news of the capture. Natives swarmed in from surrounding villages to add their voice to the chant of praise. Frenzied warriors demonstrated to their own satisfaction how they would have killed the lions. Of primitive ego. If he ever attempted to shoot that antiquated blunderbuss, it would blow a hole in Africa big enough to bury a platoon of hippos. Censorship forbids the pictured finish of this orgiastic dance, but it closes with the frenzied darkness of primitive night. Africa, mysterious, untamable.